Yeah, yeah, yeah. Baby, yeah. You know, say ready for this. You know I have patience.
Okay. All right. Yes, family, greetings. Welcome to another episode of the Grand Rising Collective podcast. I am one of your hosts, Kyle Dixon. Also have a co-host, Candid, and we have a special guest for you today, Representative Erick Allen. So for those who are not familiar with our platform, the Grand Rising Collective, we are a platform, a vehicle for those in the community, whether it be in America, whether it be in Brazil, whether it be in the Caribbean, but abroad, for people who are excellent at what they do and are able to share some of their insight and information, not just to educate, but to inspire and empower the individuals that are able to be privy to these conversations. So in reference of myself, my name is Kyle Dixon, educator for 20 plus years, entrepreneur 15 plus years. And the reason we started the Grand Rising Collective podcast is the fact that we want to be able to highlight these people, highlight what they do, highlight what they've done. And the term Grand Rising is meant as a term of endearment, like good morning. So instead of saying good morning, you say Grand Rising, rising meaning rising to the occasion, being at your best, grand, being great at what you do, and being able to overcome any obstacles or challenges that you may face. So without further ado, family, I'd like to introduce you to my co-host, Kaide. Take it away, brother.
Brother, thank you very much. I appreciate you again in my efforts to be as I possibly can. I'm going to share with you my background and what brings me to the Grand Rising Collective and why I'm so gracious and humbled to be a part of it. I believe it's important that you understand who's talking to you as well as who you're listening to. So with that said, let me introduce myself. My name is Kaide Bentley. I'm the president and founder of an organization called 4Ts, which stands for Things to Think. The mission of the organization is to help inner city youth identify their inherent skill set, meaning what they do naturally. So they can use that information that they've learned about themselves, what they do naturally, in order to complete their education, higher education, in order to establish a career and ultimately start a business if they choose to. The demographic of teens that I deal with, at-risk youth as it's called, is from the ages of 16 to 24 pretty much. And the whole purpose of that is to give them a leverage in this economy. Not only am I the president and founder of the organization 4Ts, I'm also the professor at Fordham University, where I teach social services, social justice, and form a nonprofit organization. And I also sit on the advisory board of LIU, Maryland University, all of which is designed to cascade information and inform inner city youth on how to contribute to society and helping the world make the world a better place. Now, how does this tie into the Grand Rising Collective? Because my target demographic are youth or inner city youth or at-risk youth, Grand Rising Collective gives me a platform in which to cascade that information or disseminate that information to a larger demographic, be it our community, quote unquote, neighborhood, not a community. Whereas I have the ability to share information, take this in the community, so that those in the neighborhood, so that way it gives us the ability to create communities to make the world a better place, as I said, and change the landscape of the economy as it relates to us as the minority, which is a misquote. So without any further ado, I am honored, pleased, and happy to say, you know what I say all the time, Cal be bringing the bangers, man. He be bringing the bangers. He got a representative here.
Mm-hmm. Check your
You on mute.
So Kite is on mute right now.
I got to introduce the banger that we got here, politician now we're going to learn a lot about. Cal, please be honest to introduce our brother, Mr. Allen, Erick Allen, Representative Allen, so that way we can start this discussion. Thank you so much.
Indeed, family. So, all right. So in reference of the guests we have on today, family, we have Representative out of Georgia, state of Georgia, Mr. Erick Allen, as our guest today. And I wanted to bring him on because, as you know, with a lot of the things that's going on in the world right now, politics, certain things with the COVID-19, with the protests, with certain civil rights icons transitioning, I felt like he would be a person to talk to kind of give us a little insight on not just the things that are happening, but the things that we may need to be looking out for in the near future in reference of politics and government and certain policies that may have been passed or trying to be passed. So, Mr. Erick Allen, thank you for joining us today, first off.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me. It's a pleasure to be on with you, and thank you for the invite.
Indeed, indeed. So, for those who are not familiar with you, could you please explain like your background and how you got into politics initially?
Man, so I represent Georgia's 40th House District. If you are familiar with Georgia, I represent portions from North Buckhead all the way up through where the Atlanta Braves play baseball and into what they call Vinings, the Smyrna area, city of Smyrna. So it's the third, one of the interesting things I tell people about the district I represent is one of the top 5 affluent and well-educated districts in the state of Georgia, and probably a 20%, 22% Black voting base, but yet I represent them. And that is, I think, a testament not only to our community, but also to me, my style, my team, and the relationships we've been building over the years. So really proud to represent this district in Georgia. And, in Georgia, like the federal government, we have the state house, we have the Senate. I represent in the House, the lower chamber. It's 180 of us. It's a rambunctious crowd. It's a very hyper political group. But we do deal with some of the most important policy that impacts Georgians' lives. So I enjoy what I do, not only at the state level, but also, dabble and play around in the federal politics as well as local, because to me, it takes all levels to make sure that you're in sync to provide for the district that you represent. So I've been, first campaign was in 2014. I'm up for re-election in 2020. We go every 2 years here in Georgia, just like in the U.S. Congress. And so we're in the middle of an election in what will, in my opinion, be one of the most consequential elections of a generation, of a lifetime. So I am thrilled to be on the front line of the fight in 2020. And I encourage everybody listening, I'll go in and get it out at the top of the hour. Make sure you're voting. I don't care who you're voting for, make sure you vote. And I seriously mean that. It's about being counted, being on the roll, and making sure that your voice is not silenced by anyone. So I don't care who you vote for, but go out and vote and exercise that right. I was at the memorial services of John Lewis today, and I think I would be remiss if I didn't push that message forward, that you have someone who gave so much for that right for everybody to vote, that we got to take advantage of that. And like I said, 2020 is going to be one of the most consequential votes of a lifetime.
Indeed. And Representative Allen, like because I want to stay on this for a minute, because I did watch the memorial for John Lewis, and it was definitely, man, like it definitely makes you really sets in the idea of the magnitude of this man and what he did for us as people and for America as a country in general, like what he represented for his humanity, his resilience, and just like his service, man, to people. And could you speak on that? Because I know myself and Kaida, we sometimes speak about like Atlanta and Georgia as a whole, and like what makes Atlanta, that city, so special as far as like Black politicians and just, because Dr. King was out of there, you got Ralph Abernathy,
C.T. Vivian.
Yeah, C.T. Vivian, Maynard Jackson. Like you got a strong Black political base in Atlanta. Like what makes it so special like that?
Atlanta is a very active city, when it comes to activism. It was also, really a central hub. If you look at the South, Atlanta was pretty much a central hub. A lot of those, leaders got their starts in other places, and a lot of activities from the movement was in Alabama, Tennessee, Mississippi, Georgia, all over the place. But Georgia really found itself as kind of a hub for a lot of that. And I think over the years, it's just developed as kind of a hub for Black business, Black entrepreneurship, a fair amount of Black wealth, come out of Georgia. So I don't know if it was anything that was particular about Atlanta, giving that. I think it's just really that, like I said, that central hub where leaders could come together and then disperse and have activities all out throughout the South. You know, I think Congressman Lewis is more known for what he did in Alabama to most people than for his service in Georgia. You know, so I don't want to, you know, take away from the work that was done. I mean, even you know, John Lewis got his start in Nashville, you know, when he was at Fisk.
Exactly. Fisk guy, holla, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, you know, he got his start, you know, and doing the with the sit-ins, which is where he met Vivian.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and then so it's really a web of the South, and if you look at that, that's where the need was. But you know, Atlanta, you know, the old name for Atlanta was Terminus City because the trains all came in through. I mean, Atlanta's always been a hub, and so really, when you think about why, you know, a lot of this percolated in Atlanta, I think it's mostly because of just the regional proximity it had to where the need was, and everything kind of sprouted out of Atlanta.
Okay. All right. Okay. I know Kaya's beaming over there.
I'm good. I'm trying to soak this in. I'm trying to get this information. I have two questions, pretty much, and I don't know how I want to preface it. So let me start. Let me start with this one. What's the actual function of a state representative? What is its actual function?
So constitutionally in Georgia, we have one job. Our only constitutional requirement every year is to pass the state budget. That's it. The appropriation of funds. Outside of that, we deal with, this year, we physically dealt with over 1,000 pieces of legislation in 40 days. So the way the Georgia legislature is set up is we only have 40 legislative days starting on the second Monday of January to finish all of our business. So it's a very compressed, you know, schedule. So typically we're only in session January, February, March, usually get out beginning of April, somewhere in there. And, you know, during that time, you could see, you know, a myriad of things. You know, this year, Georgia was only one of 4 states that didn't have a hate crime bill. This year, we corrected that. We now have a hate crime bill in Georgia. There were, I'm trying to think of some of the other more prominent things we dealt with. Most people don't care about, you know, naming the state, the show bass, the state fish, and all the other stuff we do. But there's some consequential stuff that we, you know, we grapple with every year. You know, justice reform is always one of the top issues that we have. And we had some really bad bills coming through this year because the majority is not Democratic, not Democrats. And we have some agendas that get pushed. So we had a very horrible gang bill that they tried to push that would actually consider any group of 3 or more involved in a crime all charged with the same statute as a gang.
Wow.
So literally you can have 3 teenagers go out and TP a house and they're a gang and they put on a gang registry. So this is some crazy stuff like that you know, we deal with. So it's really, you know, the role of the representative is not only to take the active vote on those measures, to have the debate on those measures, but also to stay informed and to hear from your community on what's important to them. So it's a full-time responsibility because when you're not legislating, you're doing your constituent outreach, your activism, you're sitting there listening to your community to find out what needs to be done. And the exciting part for me is every day, well, not every day, but every once in a while you learn about some different issues you never even thought about. You know, we had a issue in my district last year with ethylene oxide. Nobody knows what ethylene oxide is. It's a carcinogenic, cancer-causing gas that they use to sterilize medical equipment. Well, we didn't even know that we had one of these in our district, right there on the Chattahoochee River, right on between Atlanta and Cobb County, that has been there since the late 1970s.
Wow.
And so I learned more about ethylene oxide in the last year and put forward legislation to address it. Had to work with the federal FDA and got into some spats with the Trump administration over it. But those are kind of like the day-to-day things that you know, I tell young people going into politics, don't go in with your agenda thinking that's what you're gonna get done. Because the reality is as soon as you get in, you're gonna be confronted with all kind of issues that constituents bring to you that you need to think about. Because you don't live in a bubble. You know, everybody's got their own experiences, their own interactions with different agencies and different parts of government or just services. And you learn a lot from that. So back to your question of what do? We do a lot. It's not just the legislation, it's also the constituent, issues and outreach. And it's also connecting people to the right arms of government, whether it be the federal government or local government or whatever it is. A lot of times the state's right in the middle of it. So it's a very good role.
Thank you so much, Representative Allen. My follow-up question to that is, one of the things we need to learn, and let me know if I'm choppy or if you can't hear me.
You're good.
Awesome. One of the things that we need to learn as a community is the role of politics. I think we lose sense of that. Like, everybody banks their vote on every 4 years the president, but don't realize it's the annual votes that really make a difference. Who you bring in as your representative, your assembly person, your council person, things of that nature, who you can, in essence, build up to get to that point of a representative that hopefully represents the whole. So my question to you, Representative Allen, your suggestion, and it doesn't have, I mean, this is just from your vantage point, your perspective, what would you say should be the actual starting steps to, just say, for an example, we here in Harlem should do in regards to getting elected officials in office who will properly represent their constituents, as opposed to getting into office, such as politicians going into Black communities just to get the vote. And then as soon as they get the vote, then they forget about they forget about the promises that they made. So my question to you is, what advice could you give to us people who aren't as in tune to politics, the first steps we should take in that process in getting the people in office who are going to properly represent the constituents that they made promises to, and to have them adhere to it after they're in office? I know that was a big question, but do the best you can in trying to.
It's a huge question. I'm gonna answer it in one word, and then I'm gonna expand on why I'm saying that. And y'all will find out real quick that I give it to you real. Vote. Vote. Every election, every opportunity you get, every time, vote. And the reason I say that, and people need to understand, when you vote, that's public record. Okay? Nobody knows who you voted for, but they know you showed up. Okay? So let me give you an example on a city council. You go in and you call your city councilman and say, you know what, my neighborhood needs a new park and a sidewalk. Okay? You always give the other side of town, they got all these nice sidewalks, they got these new parks, with turf, we don't get nothing. You're not doing your job. I want a sidewalk and a park in my neighborhood. The natural calculus for that city council member is to say, all right, well, let me look up Mr. Cal Dixon. Let me see. Oh, you know what? Cal Dixon ain't never voted in his life. I'm just being real.
Yeah.
Now let me look at Quixote. He votes every election cycle, in the primary, in the general. Because you know what? The likelihood is that he got 5 or 10 friends that also vote like that. So when he called and asked for that sidewalk, I'm gonna be a little bit more responsive. But Cal, when you call, am I really accountable to you?
Right.
I mean, really, am I really accountable to you if you don't vote? So the only way you build in that accountability measure is have your name on the roll. Because no matter how much you feel that an elected official will ignore you, if they truly are in tune and understand their job is to be accountable to the voter. Okay? Now, you hope that they're accountable to everybody, but the only accountability measure you have is your voice to get them out of there. And so a lot of people, and I find this, just real talk, a lot of the people that come to me and talk about how they're frustrated and they're not getting what they need and the services they need, I really sit down and talk to them and say, all right, I'm going to pull a heat map and I'm going to show you the county, and here's the concentration of where votes come from. And I'm going to zoom in on your neighborhood and show you that all these people around you are not doing what these people over here are doing. So when you say the people over here have more, it's because they're actually holding their representative government accountable. The only way to catch up with that is to participate and hold that representative government accountable as well. Once we do that, I think we'll start to see a little bit more parity, but majority of the people, let me not say majority because I want to be factual, there's a large number of people who constantly are frustrated by the process but refuse to get engaged in it. And until we fix that, and that's like I said earlier, you talk about Congressman Lewis and the things that he fought for, the vote. You know, it's one of his favorite quotes that I love, reading from it. If not us, then who? And if not now, then when? Go vote. Go. I mean, literally, there's no other mechanism to hold an official accountable at any level of government. There is no reason why you should not take that right to go out and vote. And I don't care who it's for, but get your name on that roll, because then people will start to pay attention to you. If you and your church group, no matter how much work you do in the community, they will respect you for that work that you do in the community. But if all of y'all show up and talk about how your voters, and we say, you know what we're capable of in the community, we can turn that against you. You want to be on our team. And it's leveraging that power and that authority that you have through your vote that I think makes a big difference. So if there's one thing I can say to people to start correcting some of that, go vote.
That was a great explanation. I mean, because I'll be honest, Representative Allen and family, like, there were some times back in my younger days that I did not vote. And I'm not ashamed to admit that, because some of the things that Representative Allen was talking about, just the process, and then how we always talk about the lesser of the two evils. Malcolm talked about, a lot of people talked about it from the 60s on up to now, before then. Even in Booker T. Washington's book, Up From Slavery, he talked about even the process of voting in the county of Alabama. He mentioned something in the book that really kind of made me kind of think hard about, is he mentioned that whoever the white folks were voting for, the black folks just voted the opposite. So in the county, which was kind of intriguing. But to go into the question, Representative Allen, what about the voter suppression that's going on, especially in Georgia? I heard during the last, I guess, city or state election that the voting machines, I know Stacey Abrams, right?
Yep.
She mentioned something about the voting machines being malfunctioning or not even being plugged up. And many young voters in Georgia wanting to vote in certain districts in certain counties, but not having the access to because of these shenanigans that people are playing. Who is in charge of that? Like, how can they overpower that and make sure that their vote is counted?
Well, first of all, the suppression that we deal with now, there's no difference in what we deal with now than it was when they tell you to count how many bubbles it is in a bar of soap. We got to quit thinking we evolved into something different. It's the same suppression tactics. Okay, now what we're dealing with now is a matter of access. So there's the right to vote. You have your registration. And we can talk about that too, because that's even in question sometimes with how that process works.
Definitely,
but if you look at just in Fulton County alone, there was a significant amount of precincts that were closed or combined. So you have these mega precincts where, in the era of COVID, people are trying to go and vote. But where you typically have 300-400 people that vote in that precinct, you got 1,200 or 1,400. Well, how do you think that's going to work? That's not how it's equipped to be handled. Also, this year, Georgia just rolled out new voting machines. So we got that component. We have a whole new technology that people are learning. You also have, in the era of COVID, where your most vulnerable population are the exact mirror of the most likely to work at the polls on election day. So they're not coming out the way they used to. When you go to polls, your poll workers are retirees. They're people who have retired. They don't have a job, so they can give back.
Yes,
they're not showing up in the era of COVID. So now let's look at the whole thing. You've got larger mega precincts. You've got brand new technology, and you have poll workers who are limited in not only number but also in their experience in managing an election. So all of that converged on what we call the primary, and we had a debacle in the primary. So I don't think it's the right game to start ascribing blame on that. But we also have to understand that some of that is done intentionally with the precincts. That you don't have to. I mean, I applaud the Atlanta Hawks. They, for the early voting, they're actually opening up State Farm Arena as the largest polling location, I think, ever in Georgia.
Nice.
So literally anybody in Fulton County, and it has a MARTA station right under it. It's accessible to most people. That is going to hopefully solve a lot of problems for the early voting, to get people out and early vote and solve that. So I kudos to them. But that's not going to solve it for the whole state. And it's not just a problem in Georgia. I mean, their voter suppression, you've got exact match law. It's like that what's in the voting system, then you're not going to get the vote. So if your name is Lachey and it's got LA-SHA, but on your driver's license it has LASHA and no hyphen, well, that's not an exact match. You can't vote because your ID doesn't exactly match. If you have a hyphenated name, it has to exactly match. So you look at the people that's going to impact more. It's extremely targeted or narrow in how it's done. So there's a plethora of things that need to be changed, and I will get political for a second. And it's basically the last straw to hold on to some of the power that's out there, because we know that this is almost becoming a majority minority country.
Yes,
a lot of cities and especially urban areas, it already has been, and so there's no shock that when you hear the president start throwing out his dog whistles to what's going on in America today, it's always the urban cities and the Democrats run them. No, it's the urban cities are what they've always been. They're the enlightened centers of the country. They're the conscience of the country. There's no reason to have this. There's no diversity in rural America like it is in the urban centers.
That's true.
There's a lot of things going on right now with voters and voter suppression, but we have to be mindful. We have to make sure that we're advocating for the right policies going forward. But for November, we need to make sure we're educating people on what is their opportunity to vote. What's the process? Get on it early. Don't wait. In Georgia, they will start mailing out absentee ballots September 15th. You can literally start voting in almost a month, 45 days.
Wow.
You can start getting your ballot in the mail. Apply now. Get your ballot on September 15th and go drop it back off at the elections office. If you don't trust the mail, drop it off at the elections office. You do not have to put your ballot in the mail. So there are things we can do over the next couple of months to educate people. I'm hoping platforms like yourself and more organizations get that information out there, state by state, county by county, to make sure people understand exactly what their opportunity is to go out and vote.
Indeed. Thank you for that exhibit. Yeah, because these are tangible things that we want to present on our platform, and Kaya and I are very steadfast on that and hold very strong to those ideals for what we want for the people who listen to us.
Absolutely. You mentioned you were alluding to something, Representative Al, about registration.
Yeah.
What were you talking about? What did you want to elaborate more on in regards to registration?
Well, get registered. In some states it's not as easy to, it's a process to go out and get registered to vote. Some people think that just because you go into, if you've moved, you go into a new state and get a driver's license, you automatically register to vote. But you need to find out what those rules and those laws are. Make sure you're registered to vote. Whatever your system is in your state, go check it. Check with your Secretary of State's office. Make sure that everything is in order. We had quite a few people. There was even an elected official, a friend of mine in the Senate, who was purged from the voting rolls for inactivity. She's a sitting senator. No, we know she votes, but was purged and was just randomly checking to make sure she was okay, and found out that, oh my God, I've been purged. So know your rules. Make sure you check your status. Know what's going on. Because that's another thing, a lot, especially in the South, a lot of states are purging, saying that you have to be active. If you're inactive, you get purged. There's no rhyme or reason to that. There was a lawsuit where the Secretary of State had to add back a batch of voters that they had purged because they found out there was no reason to purge them. So make sure you're just checking your status. You know where you stand. You know what's available to you to go vote. And because if you look now, then you have a chance to cure it. The other thing I tell you is if you get in the pattern of voting every year, every time there's an election, you have less likely chance of being purged or put in that situation where you're doing it. And I'll say one more thing too. Was that enough on registration? Because you made me think about something else I want to pivot to on, because I think the question also was on the election, not the election, the question about what can you do on the accountability of holding people accountable, and what can you do to see change and to do anything else. If there's a candidate that speaks your language, that talks to you and is active for you, is sending your message, stay with them, support them. One of the biggest issues we had, and I'm going to use 2008 as an example.
Okay.
We had a lot of energy around President Obama. There was a groundswell of energy that got him elected. If that groundswell would have come back out in 2010, we would not have had the Tea Party takeover that we had. People left him. People went in and said, we did it. We got him in the White House. He's not on the ballot in 2010. So what do? We lost Congress. So you like what he was representing, but now you've made it exponentially harder for him to be effective because he no longer has the allies he needs in the House and the Senate federally. Okay, so stop abandoning these presidents. Okay, stop turning your back on them and thinking you only have to vote for them. You got to vote not only for them. This is the clearest I can say it. You got to vote for them. You got to vote for Congress. You got to vote for Senate to make sure that all these people are aligned with what you want to get done. And then you have to go to your state legislature and elect people that are aligned with them. Go to your city council, because you know what you're doing at that point? You're building a pipeline. You're building that pipeline. Because right now we have a hard, most people don't know who you say, well, you know, you love this congressman, but if something happens to them and they retire or they pass away, God forbid, who's next up? Who would you support? Most people don't even know. You don't know who in your community is bubbling up and doing, you know, so we've got to make sure we not only have the support for the people that we elect, but we're also building a bench of advocates that are going to come behind and keep everything going, because we shouldn't have to have this restart every 4 years.
Right. I agree.
So,
very good.
Very good. Support. I mean, we can do what we do. If we do what we need to do in 2020, that's only the first step. We got to also show up and do what we do in 2022. You know what I mean? Because that's the midterms, the way you have a lot of that drop off. And it's mostly with younger voters. I hate to say it, but you know, you can get all excited for the sexy race, the presidential race. This is good. I got t-shirts, I got buttons, we having rallies. This is fun.
Yes.
But 2 years later, I check out. And you can't do that. You can't do that.
Yeah, definitely. And definitely Representative Al, like when you're talking, I'm thinking about how even when I talk to some of my students or just some of my peers, like we try to focus on like the local elections. We try to say, okay, well, the president, that's the sexy part, you know, because everybody's involved. That's like nationwide. But those local elections, that is someone you can go see face to face, go to a rally, talk to them, talk to their people, and really like get like a one-on-one type of thing, a real intimate feel with that person. And it immediately affects your area, your neighborhood, your district. So what are some ways that people can maybe make that first step? Because a lot of people just may seem like voting it just seems so broad to me, or I just don't really know where to start, because I want to make sure my vote truly counts.
So I'm gonna tell you. So first thing I tell people to do: go to your cell phone, open up a new contact. The first one you want to do is your city council person. Put them in your cell phone. Then you want to go to your city mayor. Put them in your cell phone. Then you want to go to your state representative. Put them in your cell phone. Your state senator, your U.S. congressman, your U.S. senator. You know, get all all of those office phone numbers should be in your phone. Okay, because if you've got a problem, and you know you can call, you know, I've got someone speeding on my street. I want them to slow down. I need somebody to put some speed bumps up there, or a new stop sign, or a stoplight, and anything. You know what? I got this. I got them on my cell phone. Let me go call my representative. Right. You know, let me go call my city council member. And you talk to them. You call them, because I'll tell you what, you start to learn. It was funny. I had an intern the other day. We're having a Zoom meeting. And they were talking about what they called it. Yeah, I heard from this constituent, and they started telling me what they were talking about. I said, oh, that was so-and-so. His name, but right off the bat. They're like, how'd you know? I'm like, because it's the first time they called about this. But seriously, to what you were saying, Kyle, when you get to those frontline leaders, you know, like your city council, your mayor, those, depending on the city, you know, you should know those people, your alderman, whoever it is in that first line of what I say between you and your home, connecting your street to Main Street. You should know who those people are, and then work your way through, and even challenge yourself to how many of those you can go through without even having to look them up. Just the name. Most people don't even know. If you wrote the map and said, let me start at the elected office closest to me, which is usually like an alderman or city, whatever it is, and work your way up sometimes you get stuck before you know anything else. The other thing I would say is go out and find out the two people you need to know their name: your sheriff and your DA.
Huh.
Everybody want to talk about criminal justice reform and everything else, but if you don't know the name and the behaviors of your sheriff and your DA, I want you to stop about it. You need to do the work. You need to look it up and find out who they prosecuting, why are they prosecuting, are they over prosecuting, or anything? Because most people don't even know those are elected positions.
Wow. Wow.
So you don't like it that they keep locking somebody up, or they keep overcharging for marijuana possession, or they focusing on this. You know what? You make the phone call, organize your community, and say, you know what, Mr. DA, we need to have a conversation. So I just there's so much we can educate people on, just understanding the levels of government and how it works. You know, I can't remember if it was I think it was on Kamal Bell's show on CNN, where somebody said the American system isn't broken; it's working just fine.
Yeah.
It's not broken. It's not broken.
No.
It is working extremely well. We have to disrupt it. We have to be the one. I mean, we really have to be the ones to disrupt it. You know, when colonists threw tea off of the shores of Boston, that was protest. Right. Okay. Wow. And I got into a debate. I know I'm rambling on a bunch of stuff, but I got into a conversation with somebody that was against the protests that were going on in Atlanta. Okay. I say, oh, these are just hoodlums. They burning stuff down. They doing it. I said, let me explain something to you. The logo, the seal of Atlanta is a phoenix rising from the ashes. Okay.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. We burned down one Wendy's, and you call them hoodlums. In the Civil War, they burned down the whole city. So let's put some stuff in perspective. Okay. Right. And you want to glorify what went on with the Civil War, but some people get frustrated and lit fire to a Wendy's, and now we got a big problem. So knowing the history sometimes helps you rationalize some things. You know,
to make those connections. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You were talking earlier about Kyle. You were talking about what's going on in Portland.
Right.
You know, I would tell people to rewind. You know, was it 5 years ago when the Bundys were holding that federal ranch hostage, and Obama had to send in the troops, and the same people who were on Fox News and some of these other channels talking about how egregious that was, and it's an overreach of government to go out there and do this to these people with machine guns that are just trying to make a statement and claim they land. Didn't nobody use tear gas? Mm-hmm. Nobody got shot. Nobody got thrown into an unmarked van and whistled away to a private location. So you got to understand how to frame some of these conversations that we have, and not always let your emotion take you to a place that education is better equipped to guide you.
Indeed. That historical and like you said, that education and historical reference is so important, because especially what happened to the brother Rayshard Brooks. Yeah, you know, was tragic, and you know, there's a lot of people felt like that could have really happened to them. Like the brother wasn't causing any harm, it wasn't an immediate threat, but it seemed like it always goes back historically to property. It's like the property is more valued than the people, especially when it comes to black, when it comes to people of color, you know. And it's just really disheartening, because this is the South. But again, when we talk about the city of Atlanta, it being very diverse with people, with black folks, but then Georgia itself is red. It's a red state, you know. So it's like, how does that juxtaposition function? You know what I'm saying? Like, how does that work?
I joke with people and say, do you know what's 40 miles outside of Atlanta?
What's that?
Georgia. Georgia.
And people they know what we're talking about. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, like, Georgia is not Atlanta. People confuse Atlanta with Georgia. Georgia is not Atlanta. You know, it's a completely different animal. And what happened to Mr. Brooks is sad. Mm-hmm. But you know, and this is where we have to also understand that that's not a related incident. Mm-hmm. The severity of it made it more prominent because it ended with death.
Right.
But the Black experience with law enforcement is completely different than other experiences with law enforcement. And once again, you talk about history, and I'm just for 2 seconds hit on it.
Right.
We have to be honest with where law enforcement started. Law enforcement started in this country to retrieve property. Okay, so think of the mindset of law enforcement and what we're dealing with. And I proudly say I am not on the bandwagon of defund the police. I think it's a horrible slogan. I don't think you make progress with stuff that fits on a bumper sticker or a baseball cap. Okay, I think we need to have a nuanced conversation about equipping our police with the right tools to be effective in integrating them into the community, giving the community more influence over how they're policed.
Okay.
And you do that once again by going to your mayor and saying, "Hey, who's on the hiring committee for our chief of police?
Okay.
Why are we not on there? I want to see the table.
Okay.
My local organization needs to be part of that. We need to institute a citizens review board where we come in and do. I think there are better things to do and better talking points to have than to just the visceral. Now I get it. I get what defund the police means.
Right. Because
I understand.
Yeah, I feel like it's visceral. Like I said, it's so strong because people feel like we've been brutalized. So they say, well, defund the police. Well, if you're not going to do anything right, defund you, period. Right.
And that's not, I mean, if that's the case, I got a whole lot of stuff we can line up to defund. It's not going to make us better, but we can defund it. I think the funding should be scrutinized. We should be looking at what we're spending that money on. I don't want to defund the police, but I don't want to buy them armored vehicles. We have a military for that.
Right.
That's not how you police. And it's interesting that you only have that for policing in urban centers. The way we equip and outfit our police officers are completely different in certain communities and what we do. So I think we just have to have a real conversation, a nuanced conversation about what does policing mean in America? What does it look like? And then how is there recourse? I'm a fan of getting rid of qualified immunity, where you can't go and personally, have grievance against a police officer who's done. I mean, that you can't hide behind that. If you do something wrong, you should have to pay the penalties for it, the answer for it.
Right.
So I just think there's a lot more nuanced conversation we can have around policing in America without giving it a slogan that turns people off from the conversation.
So
if you're at work and your boss comes in and say, "Look, you know what? We don't need to reimagine how your job is. We're going to have to that's perfectly fine. But we're going to defund your department." A little different. So I mean, you want to make sure you're starting the conversation the right way. So go ahead.
You made a statement in regards to qualified immunity. So you agree with it or disagree with it?
So I disagree with the qualified immunity.
Okay.
I think it has to be nuanced, though. I think you don't want to have a situation where a lot of frivolous claims are being brought up on police and everything. I think there's some middle ground, but we can't start the conversation when people say qualified immunity is off the table. I mean, in a case of gross negligence, or maybe there's a review board that a case goes through first before you waive qualified immunity for that situation. It has to be a layer. But I don't think we should have any part of society that says no matter what you do, you are immune from prosecution.
Okay.
Okay. Because it's a recipe for disaster. If in the back of my mind, I mean, think about it. If you are flying a plane and you do something grossly negligent on purpose, then you're going to pay the price for it too, because you're going down with everybody else.
Right.
There's a consequence to this, so you're more vigilant about what you're doing. If you go about your job knowing that there's nothing that's really going to happen to you personally, the city may get sued, I may just lose my job, or okay, you have a little bit less respect for being vigilant, being cautious about the way you handle situations. And we also need to figure out a way to start having the culture of policing being more inclusive within the community that it polices.
Definitely.
I think back to growing up, I remember we had like a citizens patrol. We had, it was not the same as neighborhood watch, but you kind of had more interaction with the police than what you do now.
Right.
Now you got somebody that lives all the way across town, maybe in a different county, and they drive in to come police you, and that's not a good look. So we got to figure it out. It's a lot in that conversation I think we need to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for that.
Definitely.
I want. Yeah, Cal, you had a question? Because I'm about to follow up with a question.
No, I did not. He partially answered the question I was going to follow up with.
All right, so we talked about qualified immunity, police. Thank you so much for that, Representative Allen. I want to bring it back to the structure that's in place, right? Because there's nothing wrong with the system. The system works like it's designed to work. It was never broke. So with that said, how does that tie into voter suppression? Why is it allowed to continue, and how can politicians and people help to deter from these activities? How were they able to, and this may not be in Atlanta, but prior to, like, I think it was Obama's second election, they were literally red zoning and redesigning districts to
redistricting,
like gerrymandering and whatnot.
Gerrymandering. How is that allowed, man? Like, what's come on now, talk to me about it. Let's get some real stuff.
So let me just explain. Everybody's done it since time. Now I think it's become more obvious now that you have more data, just like anything else. So I'm not excusing gerrymandering. I actually introduced legislation this year to eliminate it and go to more scientific redistricting instead of the computer modeling they do now. Because once again, so if you're not registered in a state, okay, so let's say if you're in a state where you have to register, Florida would be one, where you go in to vote, you register as a Democrat or Republican.
Okay.
All right. So they know your party affiliation. Okay. So think about this. They know your party affiliation and they know how often you vote. So that's how you get the gerrymandering. Oh, these people vote a lot and they usually vote Republican. So we start drawing. So I'll take, 60% of the district is going to be these people because they're Republicans, and 40% going to be Democrats. And that way we know we start off at an advantage. So I can show you. Hold on, let me step away for 1 second.
Okay, cool. Definitely.
I want to know that. I want to know that.
That's a great question.
Y'all see this?
Yes, we do.
This blue is my district.
Okay.
There's no reason why a district should look like this, with all these edges and everything poking out of it, and all this is because they try to carve out voters of certain interests and make these pockets. So this is what gerrymandering looks like. Whereas districts should really be more linear and say, here's your people.
Okay.
There's some precincts down in this area that have maybe 1,300 voters in that precinct.
Okay.
My district cuts the community right there to cul-de-sac, and you only have 4. So it's a very, very difficult proposition, but it's one that is very easy to explain and show people. We've got to stop it. So that's gerrymandering is the root. And I'll tell you the other problem with gerrymandering is what we see in politics right now. People say that things are a lot more political. But what we've got is, if you think about gerrymandering and you have what we call safe Democratic seats and safe Republican seats, right? If the only way you can be beat is to be outflanked by the extreme, so you got to push yourself extremely right because it's a Republican seat. So the only way you keep your seat is to out Republican the next guy that wants to come up. In these safe Democratic seats, you got to push far left because the only way to be beat is to be outflanked to the left. So you get this polarization pushing to the extremes, and the middle is left wide open.
Right.
So gerrymandering to me is not an issue of Democrat Republican. It's an issue of representative government. Because what you do is you have people who are, you wonder why people go, you see a congressman on TV and they say something, you're like, the hell are they saying? Why are they saying that? It's because they have absolutely zero recourse, because they've drawn the district so safe for a Republican. The only thing they got to worry about is somebody being crazier than them. So you can get as crazy as you want.
I got this automatic. They know what I'm about. It's like a
and that happens on both sides.
Wow.
It happens on both sides.
Wow.
So how can the same Congress spit out, both of these people. I ain't gonna name no names. We can just name some if we wanted to.
Right.
I got a couple. I got a couple in New York. We'll stay off of that. But how do you get that? Was because of the way things are gerrymandered. And so, what we need to have fair maps, but we also need people to understand where that comes from. So that's why the census, and we hadn't talked about that at all. But that's why the census is so important. And right now, you need to go to www.mycensus.gov and fill out your census. And whoever was living in your house on April 1st, needs to be counted in that census. And the reason that's important is because, one, the census dictates the amount of money appropriated to different areas. So if you only have a 40% return rate on the census, that means you're only going to get 40% of the resources from the federal government you should have gotten for that community. Okay. All right. And you talk about systematic. The reason to scare people and ask the citizenship question and all this other stuff is to get them not to do the census, and you continually suppress the amount of resources given to a community.
Right.
So the census is extremely important. It determines representation. It determines budgeting, finances, what resources are coming back to you.
Right.
So whatever vote and fill out the census. That's your two things.
Okay. Yeah, I was definitely going to lean into that.
Real quick,
yeah.
Definitely. No, I'm sorry, Kai. Go ahead.
Yeah, hold on to that question, because from what I hear, there are some concerns regarding the consensus where people feel like it's an infringement. I think they were concerned on their privacy or something in reference to, you have illegals in the country, or it's these infringement tactics or tools that they feel the consensus also includes. So yes, the census can provide funding to that community, but at what cost? At what stake of my privacy, my safety, my livelihood? So can you touch on? I'm sorry, Kyle. I hope I didn't.
No, that was actually the question. Thank you. No, that's right on point.
So, man, I can answer that so many ways. You can get me in trouble on some of them. Because I'll tell you once again, just keeping it real. We've got to be mindful of what gets into our ears and our head. All right. So the census is a tool to help us, to help us get the resources we need, get the representation we need. There's this, I run into old cats all the time, man. I ran into a gentleman, had to be over 60, and was bragging about the fact he never voted, never filled out a census.
Wow.
And I'm like, why? He's like, oh, my vote don't count. Or we've been told all this stuff. And I'm going to use, I think God gave us Trump for a reason. Okay. And I think he's saying all the quiet parts out loud right now. We need to really hear him. Okay. Yeah, but really, he don't know how to, he's saying all the quiet parts out loud. The things that we've been trying to secretly record in meetings for years, he goes on Twitter, he goes over everybody, he just says it. He's on quiet part out loud. If you look at what he's doing right now, trying to scare people into voting early, voting by mail, all of that, it's to plant that seed. Oh yeah, and then I hear people getting interviewed by, on TV, talking, yeah, well, I ain't gonna vote by mail because it's gonna. You pay your bills by mail. You do. Just think about all the things you do by mail. Yeah. All right. You don't never sit and say, I'm not gonna pay my car note this month by mail because something may happen to it. And no. Don't let those things see. The planting of the seed for the only reason that they push that whole narrative of are you a citizen on the census? It was to plant the seed of this can be used as a citizenship tool. They didn't really want to know, but they know if we plant enough of those seeds, people just won't do it because now they're like, oh, they're gonna infringe my rights. There's nothing infringing on your rights to tell somebody I got 4 people that live in my home, and here's who they are. Trust me. The government already knows. The Constitution just requires you to fill that out so you can get the resources you need. If you think the government does not know how many kids you have because you do your taxes, you don't say that's an infringement of my rights.
Right. Right. You get paid from that.
You pay your cable bill. You pay your cell phone bill. You enroll your kids in school. If you think that there's no way they can aggregate that data and find out how many people live in your house anyway, stop falling for that. all it's doing, it's a, if you think about tools of oppression, I've always said tools of oppression are next step tools.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, they require you to take another step, and that step in itself is built to oppress you. Registering to vote. Registering to vote should be automatic. I've always said, if you want to make voting tied to a state ID, as soon as I get a state ID, or I shouldn't have to have another step. I should be able to take that ID and I can vote. Why, if I have to show this to go vote, why should I have to also register to vote? Extra step. They can monkey with the extra step. You know what I mean? So census, they could easily just allocate funds based on population, school size, all that. They can find that data. No. It's an extra step. And if you have that extra step, you're likely not to do it. And we can continue to disenfranchise based on the legal ramifications of you not doing what you were supposed to do. So now it's not, we didn't take it from you.
Ooh.
You didn't tell us you needed it.
Ooh.
So all census is telling them, I need those resources. I don't have a hospital within 10 minutes, an emergency room within 20-minute drive of my home. Census could fix that. I don't have new schools or new books or new, census could fix that. I don't have a new exit ramp off of the freeway to my neighborhood. I got to go 2 miles past my neighborhood and get off an exit ramp. It's a federal highway. Census could fix that. Wow. So if you don't want to fill it out, you're saying you don't want the services, and it's all because someone planted a seed for you not to take that extra step.
Wow.
Good counter. Good counter.
Yeah. Wow. Wow. And I want to add, I want to ask I got to add to that. So I will say one thing about the census, right? And this is like kind of outside of just the resources that, and again, I've struggled with this too, family. So we're speaking from experience that can also help to, when we talk about Black folks and in our history, in our family history, census can also be a tool for you to go back and check certain records to see who was in your family. Like, so do your family lineage and family history here in America, like in certain places. So it can also be used as a tool for that. I've used it for myself. So that's why I'm speaking on it, because that's what I was like, wow, I was like, if they wouldn't have done the census then, I wouldn't be able to see the record. I wouldn't be able to see, oh, that's who filled out. That's my family member, that's my aunt, that's my uncle, or whatever the case may be. So just think about it on that note too. But also, Representative Allen, I want to go into reference to the census when you mentioned about education. Now we know Georgia is not really high as a state, as high on the ranking in the nation for education. I mean, New York is not either. But what are you all doing with the new? Because I'm an educator, I'm a teacher, Kai is as well, and we're having a hard time adjusting, a challenging time adjusting with COVID going on and a lot of this digital divide that has already been there, but COVID-19 has exposed it. So what are you and your constituents doing as far as like helping these school districts, these individual schools to prepare to make sure that we stay on target or improve the education that they're already receiving? So
I've given some suggestions to the school board. I've been in touch, but I really want to. I think they're doing a good job of trying to figure out what to do. I don't want to step on that.
Right.
As a parent, I got strong feelings of certain things, but as also an elected official who has some oversight of what's going on, I try to reserve. So it's kind of a tough spot to be in. However, one of the things that I can focus on is, well, two things. One is the inability to access resources. How can we partner with organizations to make sure kids get devices? And sometimes, it's funny, I was talking with a school board member last weekend, and I was watching my daughter and watching TV and doing some other stuff. And I was like, you know what? Maybe we're thinking about this all wrong, because everybody keeps saying we need to get Wi-Fi. We need to get, all this other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
What if we got cooperation from network TV? What if we went and said, you know what, we're going to take over PBS, the public broadcasting channel, and your local access channels. And if you're a third grader, from 1 to 2:30, you watch this station, you're going to have a teacher giving you some lesson, giving you some instruction. Maybe we need to revert back instead of trying to push forward in what we're currently dealing with. And I'm not saying that's the end all, that's the solution. I'm just saying, I think we need to really be thinking. Because I not just education, but healthcare, transit, employment, everything. COVID is not causing the problems. COVID is exposing the problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? I keep telling them COVID is not the boogeyman.
Mm-hmm.
COVID is the flashlight.
Yes. No, that's spot on. Spot on. The divide was already there.
Right.
Yeah, literally, some schools were having the discussion pre-COVID of how to make sure education gets to every child. Don't think this is because of COVID. You know, before COVID, families were trying to find out where their next meal was going to come from.
Yes.
They were going to find out if their job was secure. If you know, this is COVID is the flashlight, not the boogeyman. It's shining a lot light on a lot of social ills that we already had. Even with the, you know, there's been a lot of debate about the $600 benefit going away and all the other stuff.
Yes.
The $600 benefit was an admission by the federal government that that's really the living wage. That in order to prop up Trump's economy, he had to give this much stimulus to the average American to where they were getting enough money to just survive. If you can make that acknowledgement now, why would you then go back everything back in rainy days and lower and, you know, get everybody back on that $7, $8, $9 minimum wage deal? You got to think about this. There's a reason when this goes away, you're going to start to see things really collapse and crumble. I think it's been a strong admission that we really need to pay. If someone could make more, people don't want to go back to work because they can make more money staying home on unemployment than going back to work. I see that as a problem with our society.
Definitely.
The average person can't make enough to survive, and they make a conscious choice that I can make more doing nothing. I mean, I think it's going to lead to a stronger policy discussion around what our minimum wage is and what is a living wage and what do Americans need to sustain themselves. You also talk, you think about what Andrew Yang was talking about when he was running for office.
Right. Yes.
We're about to have the second dividend. So technically, what he was saying about giving every citizen $1,000 a month, we're literally about to start cutting a check where we've given citizens $1,200 every quarter. There's not much difference. So once again, you're saying that there's some value to stabilizing economy and making people more comfortable in what they do by giving them a dividend, giving them that money back. So I just think COVID is going to expose a lot of questions that we're going to be able to ask and hopefully have some reasonable conversations about in the near future.
Definitely.
Real quick. We're at the top of the hour. Representative Al, please come on. We got like at least 2 more questions, man.
I'm good.
Okay, cool. I want to add on to what you said because I read this book called The Rich and the Rest of Us by Tavis Smiley and Cornel West.
Yes.
And they were talking about in the book how 47% of the people in America are below the poverty line, if at or below the poverty line. And this is not just white folks, black folks. This is everyone. And like you were saying with COVID, with the stimulus, especially here in New York, they were fighting for the minimum wage to raise it up to I think 15.
15.
Yeah, 15. And I have students, parents, I have adult students who work a lot of these like jobs with fast food or construction or service, hospitality, and they're very hard, diligent workers, people who don't call out. They go to work every day, but it's not enough. It's not enough, And with the stimulus check, it's just it just really shows the gap, right, that we have in this country. Like you said, that if I'm getting more sitting home than I am going to work, then was I being exploited this whole time? Then if I'm putting in the hours and putting in the time and the energy, but I'm making more sitting at home, like who is really benefiting here?
You know what? So once again, I take everything back to a historical perspective, and I hope people watching don't think that I'm some negative dude, but I just think we have to have we have to have real conversations. All right.
Yeah.
The ideal of American exceptionalism. Let's deal with it. How we're so great. We're the wealthiest, most powerful. All right. Cal, you said you're an entrepreneur.
Right.
If you and I start a business at the same time selling the same product, but I have to pay for labor and you don't, who's going to be more successful?
Exactly.
We started our exceptionalism on a premise of not paying for labor, and we've been struggling with that the whole existence of America.
Indeed.
So
Real talk.
We have struggled since the inception of our founding, not even as a country, but hitting this continent. We have struggled with the concept of paying for labor because it dips into our profits. And we still struggle with that today. So just let that sit there for a minute.
Yes. You hear that, family? He's hey.
No, I mean, seriously. I mean, does it make sense though? I mean, that we and like I said, I'm not saying to be doom and gloom, but I think we can respond better if we think about things from a historical point of view.
I agree.
And not getting these emotional debates. Nobody I say that to can debate me on that concept.
Right.
I'm not placing blame. I didn't say the slavery word. I didn't say. All I've said is since the inception, we have struggled with paying for labor because we see it as something that eats into our profits, and our profits come before the people. And so until we as a country shift our mindset and say maybe the path forward is to not view labor as the negative, as the boogeyman, but as what generates continued wealth because it sows back into what we do.
Right.
We're going to continue to have some of these problems, but we struggle with that.
Powerful. Love that. Never heard of it like that before. Excellent.
Neither. That was good.
Excellent. My dad and I have conversations about that as well regarding the back. We go. All right. Thank you. I'm going back to that. Now,
I want to be in my book. Don't worry about it. I have a whole section of it.
Let us go. I'm definitely fine. Oh, there's some books we can. I didn't real quick. I want to go. I want to address another question because I want to make sure it's clear for me as well as the listeners. The stimulus check, is that a good thing or a bad thing? Was the stimulus check a good thing, or was the stimulus check a bad thing, Representative Allen?
It depends. Good for who and bad for who. You know, you things that are good for are also bad for. Okay, so I would say good for the single mother who was about to lose her apartment in the middle of a pandemic. I say yeah. You know, bad for the local restaurant owner who's trying to, like we said, get an employee to come back to work, but they're going, nope. You know what? I'm better off without you because you're paying me slave wages. Bad for them and their business. So good for and bad for. Which one are you? I mean,
damn.
Yeah.
For the overall economy, as such as government, the Congress making the decisions regarding, the stimulus check is too much, it's encouraging laziness and staying at home. Overall, is the stimulus check good for the economy? Whereas these people have more money to buy more produce or product or service.
I think it's bad for one reason. I'll tell you, it's bad for one reason. Or bad in one reason, not for one reason. Is like I said, it could be good, it could be bad, it depends. I don't want to distinguish that. But one of the negatives, and it could also be a positive for some, is that the economy that we live in now, okay? The numbers came out today, and I'm trying to remember, I think it was 32, it was more than 30% contraction in GDP the second quarter. Worst drop in GDP in the history of the country, worse than the Great Depression.
Wow.
But we don't feel it. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? We're literally at Great Depression level unemployment and recession, and yet we don't feel it.
That's a bad thing.
You know, so that's where I say it could be the bad. Now, the good that I think comes out of this is people now realizing that the disparity between the haves and have-nots, the wealthy and the unwealthy, because there's no reason for the stock market to still be at all-time highs. So all this money is done to stimulate and prop up one segment. So we're doing our job of stimulating and moving on. What I would like to see more people do is build wealth during this period. Most wealth is made during a recession.
Right. Yes.
And if you're getting no stimulus checks, you get anything else, put that in savings. Don't go out and buy that new pair of Jordans you've been thinking about, a new flat screen you've been thinking about. Put that money away.
Right.
Because this is a rare opportunity. I mean, I was talking to a group the other day. There's some families right now that, because of COVID and the response to it with CARES, they're getting more money than they've ever gotten. Their mortgage or their rent has been forgiven or suspended or whatever else in some cases. If they had student loans, federal student loans have been suspended for a couple of months. They got. How much money are you getting? I mean, and you may be making more than you've ever made.
Mm-hmm.
That money should be going into savings, not living on the hog right now. Not
Right.
living on the hog, putting that money away, because that's where we start to build the generation. The other thing I'll say is, you know, with wealth and with our community, the concept of generational wealth, we got so much catching up to do.
Yeah.
And
We never catch up.
well, the way the system is, no, we won't, because it was when we were promised land, our families. So you got to realize where most generational wealth comes from. It comes from land.
Land, exactly.
When we were freed and we were supposed to get 40 acres and a mule, we never got 40 acres. We already started from a position of, you know, at 40 acres be worth a whole lot for some families right now.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So it's, to your point, I ain't gonna belabor that, but to your point, I think the stimulus can be a good thing for some. Overall, for the economy, I'm not sure it's good, because it's also debt. And eventually you got to pay that debt. The United States don't print money just for the hell of it. We still got debt. And at some point, that's going to come home to roost.
Mm-hmm.
And where's our economy going to be when that happens? And how much can the economy take? I mean, 32% drop in GDP in a quarter, you don't recover from that quick.
No,
you don't recover from that quick. So
and family, when he says GDP, for those you don't know, he's saying gross domestic product.
Yeah.
And like he's saying
it's the measurement of the overall economy. So whereas you have, I mean, think about it in context. Here's what I told somebody today. Think about it in context. For the last 3-4 years, the president has been bragging about 2 to 3% increase quarter over quarter of GDP. And said he would be at 4. That was something to brag about. But it just went the opposite way, 32%. So 1,000-fold, 1,000 times, 100 times, that's 1,000 times, literally drop that delta between where you would want to be and where you ended up. It's not a good spot.
Not at all.
And yet the stock market only took about a 200-point hit today. You know, NASDAQ went up. So that should tell you there's a big difference between when people talk about the economy in terms of the stock market. The average person didn't feel like they only took a 2% hit today. Right. People lost their job. They took a 90% hit. No, they taking real hits. It's a big separation between the stock market and the economy. And I think this should help people realize that more than ever. We hear politicians bragging about how great the stock market is. It's got nothing to do with how the average person feels right now. As a matter of fact, people like to say that, you know, was it 60% of the people have interest in the stock market. No, they don't. They have it locked up in assets they can't get to till they retire.
I'm sure.
Exactly.
They don't have access to that money. It's not liquid.
Exactly.
So no, they don't, I mean, they have an interest in it for the future, but for today, it ain't gonna put no food on the table.
I'm also they're trying to defund Social Security, if I'm not mistaken. They're trying to cut away. No,
that's always talked about.
Okay.
As long as the predominant voting bloc is 55 and older, ain't no politician touching Social Security.
Okay.
but the point we talked about earlier, that constituency is strong because they always vote. Because Social Security is in, and it will take a fool to drastically mess with Social Security, because those are the voters that will come after you and make sure you lose your job.
Okay. Dang. You got another one, Cal? Because I got some more. I got like one more.
Go ahead.
This is a little transition.
He's answered all mine. I'm like, man,
So we talked about the economy. We talked about the stimulus check. We talked about the gross domestic product, all great information. I want to ask them specifically to Georgia, right? We made the clarification in regards to the difference between Atlanta and Georgia, right? So talking specifically in reference to Atlanta, what makes Atlanta such a special city for Black politics and culture within a red state like Georgia?
We fight. The thing about Georgia is Atlanta is in Georgia, and nothing has been given to the Black community in Georgia. People think that the Black community in Atlanta has been like given this panacea, this land of fruit and honey, milk and honey, and fairies and elves, and we got all, it's just beautiful. And no, we fight. We constantly have to fight against the structures that are put in place. It's no different than anywhere else. And so when you say what makes it such a different place for politics and for social activism and all this other stuff, it's got a bench of fighters, full of fighters who are ready to come, ready to take the next. You know what I mean? It's like we constantly have to fight fight harder to hold on, and it's an amazing city to be a part of that process. It really is. The whole Metro Atlanta area is full of people who have fought, who continue to fight, and who know we're going to have to fight tomorrow.
Indeed. And Representative Al, I want to chime in on that because we're talking about fighting. Like, I've heard of the disagreement or the I won't say beef, but from the governor and Mayor, Keisha Bottoms. Does that? When those conflicts happen, because it's politics, so sometimes we have to agree to disagree, but how do those things affect the city or things getting done to help the people, especially in these like stressful times? Like, how does that work, or how does that tend to kind of pan out?
I'm gonna answer that this way.
Yeah.
The toxicity that's coming down from the top of the Republican Party right now is one of vitriol, non-accountability, and race. Mm-hmm. This situation fits every one of those checkpoints. There were 16 cities at the time the governor decided to sue, the city of Atlanta and Mayor Bottoms, that also had the same mask mandate that she did. He did not, even his hometown of Athens has a mask mandate. He did not go after any of them.
Wow.
So to go after and try to silence, because part of the lawsuit that he had was that Mayor Bottoms couldn't even make comments to the press. I mean, literally to gag
order.
Yeah, to literally stifle the speech of a sitting mayor. I don't think it's unconsequential that it happened to the Black female mayor. Mm-hmm. Nobody else fit that profile. Nobody else in that situation fit that profile. You're gonna shut up and do what I say.
Wow.
And use the courts to execute it.
Wow.
I'm white and I'm right.
and as I said, she was not the only one that had that order. Now, maybe it was because it's the biggest city and people pay attention to what happens in Atlanta. Maybe that's the rationale. But I just find it very toxic and unnecessary. It's very unfortunate. Yeah. Unnecessary. I mean, I don't know if y'all heard. Did y'all hear about Herman Cain today?
Yeah.
Yes, we did.
I really want to know how that's going to change the narrative, because the last photos we have of Herman Cain in public was him at the Tulsa rally with the president bragging about not having a mask and taking selfies with people.
Correct.
Yeah.
And now he's got COVID and he's dead.
Yeah.
And maybe that'll be, the thing that turns people's minds to, this ain't a joke. This is a pandemic. It don't care what your party affiliation is. It doesn't care who you know. It doesn't care how prominent you are.
Mm-hmm.
And the reality is when people say it disproportionately impacts Black people, disproportionately Black people were classified as essential and had to go to work.
Oh boy.
Mm-hmm.
He's kicking it.
Yes, sir.
Now I have a question. Now I've been hearing stories, and you give us your perspective, that a lot of these physicians, they don't know how to treat COVID, right? Because there's no vaccine and there's no standard medication format that they can follow. But I've also been hearing that people have been coming in with underlying illnesses and dying from those underlying illnesses, and they have been labeling it COVID in order to create fear in the populace for whatever their agenda is. What do you think about that? Like, some people, like, they're dying, people are dying, correct, but it's not necessarily due to COVID, it's due to some other ailment that they have, some other illness that they have. So what are your thoughts? Very few. So let me start with the doctors first. Our healthcare professionals are exactly that. We are the best in the country. I think they have gotten exponentially better in understanding how to treat COVID and do better by patients. Okay. I think you see less people being put on ventilators because they realize once you're on a ventilator, there's pretty much no return. Okay. The likelihood is not. So they put them on oxygen instead and try to find different methods. So I think that the treatment of patients is exponentially improved. So I don't think that doctors are a cause of some of the issues that we have going on.
Now, I do think that there is a distinction to be made between dying with COVID and dying from COVID. But that distinction can be made with a lot of things. You know what I mean? You may. I'm just trying to think of asphyxiation. You may have hard conditions, but you die of asphyxiation. So every death there's unintended. If you have diabetes, you might die young, but you might not die of diabetes. You may die of hypertension. You may die of other.
Correct.
There's a lot of things are like that. So with COVID, it's no different. I think the distinction is, even if that were the case and someone died with COVID, and they had an underlying autoimmune illness,
right?
But for the last 10 years, they've been able to be treated and been healthy with that autoimmune. If the new entrant into the scenario is COVID, I think it's a logical step to say, but for
I see what you mean.
COVID, they would have been okay. So so people say that, they're saying that, they're saying it's a COVID death, but this person had a heart problem, but they wasn't dead. So what was introduced new to the scenario that caused death? There's a lot of people with pre-existing conditions, they ain't in ICU on ventilators.
True.
Good point.
So I think, once again, I'm a rational person. Both things can be true. You can say died with COVID or died from COVID, but COVID's not one of those things that kill you. You don't die from COVID. You die because it impacts another part of your system,
right,
that exacerbates the issue. So here's the just real quick, because I know we're running out of time, but what we talked about earlier about COVID being a flashlight on all these other problems and everything else. I think COVID is doing the same thing to the human body as it's doing to society. It's just making things that were already a problem worse.
I feel you on that.
No, seriously. So
I agree. I actually agree with you on that.
Yeah, so you can't discount it and say it didn't. It did, because if you do that, you're going to allow them to do the same thing with the societal issues that we have. No. But for the introduction of COVID, this would not have been a problem.
Yeah.
Good point.
So the human body and society are pretty much on the same plane with COVID right now. It's exposing some bad stuff.
Yeah. And some of it, Representative Adams, due to some negligence that's not all our own either. It's like it's not either or. Sometimes it is both. And one thing I want to add to real quick, because I know we're at the top of the hour. I know
we're at the bottom of the hour now. We're at the bottom
now. Yeah. My bad. My bad. I want to keep going and going. But with the CDC being based in Atlanta, do you all have any privy information? No, because we got a governor that don't believe in science. CDC might as well not even be here. Wow.
We got the CDC right around the corner, and he was one of the last governors to realize COVID could be spread asymptomatically. So no.
Or on that note,
you can have all the information available to you, but if you're not willing to open it and access it, it's pointless. When you tell a kid you can have all the books you want on the shelf, if you don't crack one open every once in a while, it's pointless.
Exactly. It is. Have the latest laptop or the latest phone.
So the CDC is the book on the shelf. Our leadership refuses to crack it open and find out what's inside. So,
wow, that's crazy. But Atlanta, bench of fighters, baby. Listen, we have to close. Thank you so much, Representative Allen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I learned a lot. I like how it usually ends. Just thank you for the work that you're doing. Please keep it up. You actually taught me a lot about Atlanta, and I'm happy to hear that they're fighters down there. Really appreciate your work, brother. I will be following you. If you're on LinkedIn, I will be following.
I tell you, I'm on Twitter at Erick Allen. It's just my name. On Instagram at Rep Erick Allen, and on Facebook at Allen for Georgia. So
I will
get all those up there.
See, look, Kyle. Allen already gave us his handles, man. He already gave us So I'm gonna follow you on that. My handles on Twitter and Instagram is Balagoon Logic. I'm on YouTube as well as Kayode Bentley, also Candid Advisor and Perspective TV, where I have one-to-one interviews with influencers in my network, Candid Advisor, where I give advice on career development, relationship, things of that nature. So those are where you can find me, 4ts.org. I've been forgetting to mention this in our last podcast, but 4ts.org for the work that we do with inner city youth.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how you can find me. And again, I really appreciate Representative Allen. He's awesome. Cal, without any further ado, brother, please.
Indeed. Family, thank you for hanging with us, rocking with us on this episode of Representative Erick Allen. It's definitely been a pleasure for you coming on our platform and really sharing your insight and wisdom and just experience in reference of behind the scenes, because with politics, a lot of times people feel like, oh, they're doing this, they're doing these things, and we don't know what's going on. But you kind of gave us some inside information for us to start on the process of becoming more politically aware and how we can get involved on the local level, on the national level, of really making our voice heard through the ballot. And then, of course, after the ballot, of course, really following up with these politicians, with
engaged
and officials, to make sure that things in our neighborhoods and our communities are accessible and we have those resources. So I appreciate that. Thank you so much. And family, again, if you have any questions, concerns, hit us up, like, subscribe, share this video. If you have to watch it multiple times, I'm going to go back and watch it again to make sure I take some notes down myself. All right, become more politically aware. All right. And again, you can reach me at my handle on Instagram, DIX_KYLE. You can reach me on YouTube at Mr. Kyle Dixon. And you can also reach me on Twitter, KEasy773. That's KEASY773. And of course, as always, here on Facebook on the Grand Rise Collective podcast channel page. All right. So again, family, we appreciate you. Love and respect. Again, for those loved ones who are going through tough times, we pray for you all. We hope all ends up being well. And again, Representative Allen, thank you for your time.
Yeah.
Much pleasure. We might have to have you back on, sir.
Oh, yeah, part 2.
Yeah. Whenever you're ready.
Okay, great. That's what I'm talking about. Yes. So family, on that note, have a great day. And as we do always at the end of every podcast episode,
peace.
I can do that too.
Yeah. Baby, yeah. You know, say, ready, on this. You know, I have patience.